So in this session, we will discuss the inelastic behavior of structural components. The understanding of the inelastic behavior of different structural components is key to understanding how we can actually model them while performing nonlinear modeling. So this is the basic information required if you want to understand nonlinear modeling. Apart from different aspects in different nonlinear modeling programs, different options available, or different nonlinear modeling approaches available, even before that you should first understand what are different inelastic phenomena which are associated with different components. How a column uh, may fail in different ways, what are different inelastic phenomena associated with column behavior, how a beam may fail, and how a shear wall may fail, for example. So all of the failure modes should be clear to you first, and only then you can actually perform their simulation. You can use nonlinear model to actually simulate all of those failures. So in this first session, we will just quickly go through the conventional failure modes of different structural elements, and we will focus mainly on beams, columns, and shear walls. The content which I will be presenting in next few slides is taken from Dr. Prameen of AIT Solutions, and I acknowledge that it is his content. I am just using it for educational purpose. So here first we talk about the RC moment resisting frames. We'll mostly talk about RC components. In moment resisting frames, beams and columns, there may be several failure modes. For example, it can be flexural softening due to longitudinal bar yielding. So longitudinal bar yielding is one failure mode. Then spalling of concrete cover, then crushing of concrete core, shear failure either prior or subsequent to flexural softening. There may be premature shear failure also, which means even before flexural softening or flexural yielding, you may have shear failure. That will be a very poor design if this happens. Loss of confinement from fracture of transverse reinforcement. We know that the confinement actually modifies the behavior of concrete, the core concrete, uh, significantly. So if we actually lose these transverse reinforcement and lose that confinement, then the behavior of core concrete will also be modified and it will result in some failure. Longitudinal bar buckling and fracture. This can be also one failure mode for RC beams and columns. Lap splice failure, bond failure across longitudinal bars, and also instability. This is related to member level behavior. All of the other things are at material level, but this is member level behavior, that instability due to slenderness effects or excessive loss of strength. So even if your material is intact, it is in linear range, this member level failure may occur prior to that. So in that case, all your material capacity will not be used and you will result in a failure which is, you can say, a kind of a geometrical failure or instability failure. So let's quickly go through some pictures where I have shown you these failure which I have just shown. So for example, longitudinal rebar failures, longitudinal rebars in a particular beam may fail. They may fracture, for example, here on the right hand side. They may buckle also if they are subjected to axial compression and are not adequately confined. They may buckle also. So, and they may just fracture, or there can be pull out failure also. Uh, Column shear failure and axial failures. Shear behavior or shear failure has a typical, you can say, a diagonal crack. So this column is subjected to both axial force as well as lateral force, and you can see here that it is failed in shear. So these are the screenshots or pictures of the same test at different values of applied loading. So it starts from the intact value and then one main shear failure in one direction and then in the second direction, and then it proceeded further. So the shear failure have a typical 45-degree angle which can be identified easily. Rebar buckling and lap splice failure. You can see because of the inadequate confinement, the longitudinal rebars which are subjected to axial compression may also buckle. Here also you have an example of inadequately confined column, RC column, which is subjected to axial compression, and you can see here these bars. Inadequate lap splice also may result in such kind of a failure. So buckling and lap splice failure also is a common failure. Spalling of concrete cover, you can see here, and then the column with inadequate ties, you can see these bars have buckled because they were not confined properly. So this kind of a failure will result if you do not use closely spaced ties, for example. Anchorage failure, the concrete which is around a particular bar subjected to some applied force, that concrete may fail and finally it will result in loss of anchorage to that rebar. This is called anchorage failure. So the concrete along that particular bar which is subjected to any applied loading, it may fail, resulting in anchorage failure. So reinforced concrete moment frames can be classified either as seismically detailed moment frames or non-seismically detailed moment resisting frames. If you fulfill all the requirements of seismic detailing, which are prescribed in different guidelines and different seismic design codes, you will finally ensure a ductile flexural yielding. This is the desirable failure mode. Out of all failure modes which I have shown you for moment resisting frames, this is the desirable failure mode. You will want your structure to fail in this manner whenever it will fail at a certain loading. Prevent less desirable failure modes. Shear failure is not desirable, anchorage failure is not desirable. All those failure modes other than that are not desirable failure modes. So you will prevent them if you follow the seismic detailing requirements, and seismic detailing also will result in uh, initiate loss of lateral strength at relatively large deformations. So basically, you will want your structure to have any loss in lateral strength at relatively larger deformations compared to non-seismically detailed frames. So you are basically you are having a design finally which have a high deformation capacity compared to non-seismically detailed frames. So in performance-based seismic design, you will often uh, hear this deformation capacity. In fact, deformation capacity will have more role uh, in the overall performance of structure compared to the force capacity. So we will mostly discuss deformation capacities when we talk about performance-based design. On the other hand, non-seismically detailed frames uh, may have any failure mode. Anything can be expected from them. They may have even brittle failure also. They may have premature failures. They may have structural instability, and all of those failure modes, for example, anchorage failure, lap splice, shear, and similarly buckling, crushing of concrete, all of those failures may be expected in non-seismically detailed frames. One important consideration is about non-structural components. Generally, it is assumed that uh, these are the components which do not participate much in the overall structural response. But actually, some of the non-structural components, for example, masonry infill walls, may significantly alter the behavior of RC components. So if you have a moment resisting frame like this, and if you have a masonry infill wall, so generally it is assumed in conventional seismic design practice, structural design practice, that this wall will not alter the behavior of RC frame. But now we know that under certain conditions, and especially the way we construct masonry infill walls here in South Asia, for example, or Southeast Asia, they may significantly participate in the overall stiffness of that frame. So they may actually behave as a structural element. So therefore they may shift the location of flexural hinging, or they may also increase shear and local deformation demands on columns significantly. So they may alter the response also, they may alter the deformation demands. Those effects should be eliminated by altering the details of non-structural components. If such effects are anticipated, then their effect on member behavior should be accounted for in simulation. So first, you try to modify those non-structural components that they actually do not affect the behavior of other structural elements. If you cannot do that and they are still there, then you just account them in the analysis. You should explicitly model their effect on the behavior of frame. So therefore nowadays we often see the modeling of infill masonry walls also in different nonlinear computer models. So nowadays it is explicitly modeled in nonlinear modeling, and their effect on the RC elements is already accounted for in seismic simulation. One very common phenomena which is associated with the behavior of non-structural components altering the behavior of structural elements is what we call as the short column effect. And one common way of having a short column effect is that, let's say if we have a frame which is filled with infill wall, masonry infill wall, but that masonry infill wall is not covering the whole, you can say, height of the frame. It is only up to, let's say, certain part of the height. So this is now infill wall. In such a case, and this is a very common case, you may find that everywhere where a very strong stiff masonry infill wall is just stuffed into a RC frame, and then that is not continued up to the whole height. In such a scenario, if this is subjected to lateral loading or lateral shaking, you may see that there are significant shear concentrations at these locations where uh, the the masonry infill wall uh, is ending, and then now you have a column which is continued up to the full height, and half of the column is now having a lateral, you can say, stiffness contribution from infill wall, but the other half doesn't have. So now this will result in shear concentration at this junction of infill wall and column, and you will see in different tests also, different shake table tests, that the failure initiate from this point. Column fail at this point due to that shear concentration. So these kind of behavior, which are actually due to the presence of non-structural components, they are significantly altering or contributing to the behavior of infill, to the behavior of RC components. Similarly, shear failure can occur prior or subsequent to flexural yielding in frame members, as I have said. So if the estimated shear strength of a member is lower than its probable flexural strength, shear failure is expected prior to flexural yielding at relatively low deformation levels. This is something which should not occur. It is not desirable. However, if the shear strength is slightly larger than flexural strength, less than 30% larger for example, then shear failure could occur after inelastic deformations in the hinge regions where the strength of shear transfer mechanism degrade with inelastic deformations. Now when the structure deforms in flexural mode, if for example at a certain location there is flexural deformation and flexural failure, the shear capacity at that location in the structure also reduce. So therefore, if your actual shear capacity is slightly more than flexural capacity, what will happen is that your inelastic deformations, flexural deformations will start. They will reduce the shear capacity, and then right at that start the shear failure will occur. So which means that you should ensure that shear strength is sufficiently larger than flexural strength in order to avoid such kind of a premature failure. Then there is a failure mode which is related to joints. Joints may fail in shear, and often joints become the weakest link, and all of the member capacity is not utilized if the joint is failed. All of the material capacity, here you can see the column itself is intact, but the joints are failed here. Here also you can see the joints. So they are often the weakest link, and they are often result in the catastrophic failure of structures. So if beam and column are adequately reinforced to resist the seismic forces, then joint may become the weak link. So joints may also fail after yielding of top and bottom reinforcement of beams. The joint may experience severe shear cracking and subsequent joint shear failure. And compared to pure joint failure, this failure is more ductile since it involves beam yielding in that case. So you should ensure that joint is adequately confined. The concrete which is in joint core, it is adequately confined so that you should not have such kind of a weak link in your structure. To prevent joint failures, it is important to make sure that joint strength should be greater than the strength of elements framing into it. So all of those elements which are framing into it uh, should have relatively less strength compared to the joint strength. And joint strength is affected by several factors. I listed some of them here. For example, the joint aspect ratio, the geometry of joint, the shear strength reduces if we have high aspect ratio. So the joints which are having a high aspect ratio may have low shear strength. Confinement is a major player in that. High axial load ratios reduce the ductility of the joint and more rapid strength degradation. Then beam reinforcement ratio also affect the joint shear strength. So you should also always ensure that joints are adequately confined. One common practice in uh, conventional construction here is that the ties, stirrups and ties in columns, they are not continued in joint region because it is very difficult to detail such that actually practically do it such that the ties and stirrups they continue through the joint also. So if you have that kind of a detailing where ties and stirrups are not continued within the joint also, in that case joint will not be properly confined. So we should always ensure that the ties in the columns and beams in the stirrup, they should continue in the joint region also. Then shear walls, they may also have different failure modes, and one common failure mode is the shear failure, and it has a typical diagonal, you can say, pattern. So you can see here these shear walls, all of these almost have a typical diagonal failure in both directions. You can see here. Here is an example of a shear failure of one wall, RC wall. So you can even see reinforcement in both directions. So the deformation capacity and failure mode of shear walls is sensitive to loading history and the shear stress levels, force, applied force level. So here you have three examples. This wall is subjected to only monotonic loading, only loading, lateral loading in one direction, and only moderate force is applied. This wall will actually have this kind of a fan pattern in one direction only, okay, and uh, it will have a drift ratio of 0.07. I will show you their complete behavior also, force deformation behavior. in the next slide. And the failure is the fracture of longitudinal reinforcement. So finally, the longitudinal reinforcement, which are somewhere here in the extreme edge, it fractures, and then finally complete failure of this wall occurs. Now the second wall, this one, is subjected to the loading on both directions. This is cyclic loading, but the loading level is moderate. So now you have the same fan pattern of cracks, but now it is in both directions. Okay, and the drift ratio is decreased. It is decreased to almost half. So which means that the deformation capacity of this wall have reduced because we have applied force on both directions. So the same wall is actually exhibiting a low deformation capacity. It is failing on a low deformation level. The third case is the same wall which is now applied with forces in both directions, cyclic forces, and the forces are high, not moderate. We see that the deformation capacity even reduced from the moderate level. So the failure is that it have developed design moment and failed by diagonal compression strut. So actually the diagonal concrete have crushed, and the diagonal concrete struts which have formed inside that wall, they have failed in crushing, and finally the wall as a whole fails. But it fails at a very low deformation level. So if I show you their cyclic behavior from the same test, if I push the wall just on one side, I will have this dotted black line, this one. This is the monotonic behavior. So this is wall B4, which is monotonic. Then wall B3, which is applied with cyclic loading on both directions, but the loading level is moderate. So the cyclic behavior is shown by these loops. So this is wall B3, all of these loops. So you can see here that the overall deformation capacity have reduced. Each of the new cycle have a very low stiffness compared to the previous cycle. The stiffness is degrading cycle by cycle, and it couldn't reach to that uh, level, that high level of deformation which it would have reached if the applied loading was monotonic. The third case is this one on the right. Here, for example, you have this top deflection 13 inches, and you can convert that into roof drift also, which is 0.07. But the cyclic behavior is up till this point only. So it is only now going up to 8-inch top deflection. And then if you further increase the value of load, because here you just go up to maybe 70 kips, but here you are going more than 70 kips, you are going up to 150, up to 160 kips. If you increase the loading, you will see that the deformation capacity even reduced from that. So the wall is now going only up to maybe 5 inches, or corresponding to this number of roof drift, basically top drift, not roof in this case. So coming back to the conclusion that the deformation capacity and failure mode, they are sensitive to loading history and shear stress level. Failure mode also will be different if you apply monotonic loading or cyclic loading. So different damage patterns and the cyclic or hysteretic response of shear walls. Here you have seen this is the web crushing. It should be different because we are loading the structure in different ways. The capacity is also dependent on the procedure which is used to calculate that. It is dependent on the loading protocol. It is dependent on the failure description also. I mean, it is dependent on many things. So one of the things is how you are loading that structure. For example, let me give you an example that let's say that you have a particular element and you are giving low levels of few cycles first and then reach to a particular high level. and in the other you just directly reach to a particular level, the capacity will be different. And another case where you just give one or two low level and then directly reach to that level, again the capacity will be different. So it is dependent on how you actually load the structure. Material is same, cross-sectional geometry is same, only the difference is in the applied loading. This example is showing you that how the characteristic of applied loading actually modifies the behavior. So all of these cyclic loadings are still different from the random dynamic loading which this particular shear wall may experience during a real earthquake. So, but this is, you can say, close to that dynamic behavior compared to monotonic. So the difference is only in the application of applied loading. So which means that when there is a hysteretic phenomena involved, whenever there is a reversal of applied loading, then the behavior becomes sensitive to the characteristics of loading. For example, if you have an earthquake which have a time history, for example, ground acceleration time history UG dot dot, which is like this, that it has a very low level and then one big pulse in that. Compare it to another ground motion which have this kind of a ground time history. Both will result in different behaviors exhibited by the same structure, because the characteristic of applied loading is different now. So all the capacities, all the behavior which is expected from a structure, in both cases it will be different. So there can be several failure modes in shear walls, and one can be web crushing. Web crushing simply means that there can be diagonal compression struts which are formed as a result of the applied horizontal force. Those struts can fail in compression, they may crush. So for example, here you see this is the initial crack pattern when there is only one-sided loading, okay, and then when you increase that loading, finally uh, at a low level the shear resistance may be coming from the whole intersection of this whole base of that wall, but when at a very high level of forces, or after certain you can say reversals of applied loading, the cracks may increase significantly such that the shear resistance may only come from part of the total leg length of that leg of shear wall, and that portion may crush also if the force exceed a certain value. So that will become web crushing zone, and one real example of that web crushing you can see here. The applied loading was in this direction, and here you can see the concrete crushing as a result of that. So this is one failure mode. This is one way the shear wall can fail. But there are other ways also. For example, one is sliding shear. The whole wall fail at the base and it just slide. So you can see here in this case a close-up look that all of the rebars here, although it was supposed to be fixed at the base, but because of the failure at base, all of the wall basically slided and you can see the deformations in the longitudinal steel here. A real example taken from this source is also shown of this failure, sliding shear failure. Then there can be an out of plane wall buckling. Wall can buckle also under extreme compression forces in out of plane directions, and generally they are not designed in the out of plane direction, so they can buckle in out of plane direction. So you can see here extreme compression forces have buckled them. You can see here also this is the whole RC wall buckled in out of plane direction. So this is also one failure mode. Then another one is the boundary compression failure, and that is you can see here that this is at a very low level of deflection. There are some fan like crack pattern, 3-inch deflection, and then at 6-inch you can see here that the extreme parts of that uh, shear wall, if the loading is in this direction, then this portion is in extreme tension, this portion is in extreme compression. So the part which is in extreme compression, the rebars may buckle at that location. For example, here you can see the rebars may locally buckle at the extreme compression zone, and this is also called as boundary compression or boundary failure. Similarly, the extreme tension zone, the longitudinal rebars may fracture also. This may also be one failure mode or damage pattern for shear walls. There may be some global behavior also for RC buildings. For example, okay, this is the lap splice failure in columns, and column failure may result in global failure also. There may be an infill failure induced soft or weak story. You may have certain infill walls, and they are considered non-structural elements, but actually they are significantly contributing in the stiffness of the actual structure. So they are behaving as structural elements, but they are the very first elements to crack during an earthquake. For example, if I have this frame, let's say it has 2 stories, and it has it has masonry infill walls in it, and let's say that I apply the horizontal forces, and let's say that this is a real structure applied with some real this real lateral forces, and let's say that the sum of all of these applied forces is the base shear, and the delta is the roof deformation. The actual horizontal behavior of that frame will be like this, nonlinear. And let's say that this is the point at which there is significant yielding in longitudinal steel bars, and therefore the line becomes nonlinear after that. But you will observe, if you actually carry out that experiment, then line will start in a nonlinear way right from start. So at a very low level of drift or a very low level of applied force, you will experience that these masonry infill walls cracked, and they are not contributing now. They have just left the frame. The stiffness contribution from these walls is now finished, and therefore from that point onward you have only frame behavior. So they are only contributing in a very small range in the initial stiffness of that frame, and they are very first to actually fail during an earthquake or during an applied horizontal loading. So if, for example, you have some non-structural damage, masonry infill walls are cracked, you may think that it is not a significant damage and it can be easily repaired, and it may not affect the structural response. But actually, because of that behavior, that they were really contributing as a structural element previously, after their failure, they may render the structure irregular. Some portions or some panels of masonry infill walls may fail, but others may remain intact, and this may result in inducing the irregularity, either plan or vertical irregularity, in the remaining structure, and the remaining structure is now more vulnerable compared to the original structure with all the masonry infill walls all around. So there may be a particular story where certain infill walls are failed, but all other stories may have intact infill walls. So that particular story will actually become a weak story, uh, or a soft story in in and the behavior of the overall building will be different now. Similarly, you may have the global capacity failure, for example, due to global failure due to the soil bearing capacity. This is due to the liquefaction of soil. For example, you see that whole building is intact, but it just rotated because of the loose soil, which just behaved as a liquid in case of ground shaking. So in this case also, uh, the soil bearing capacity will have its key role, and then this is also one global failure. Obviously, this is something which is dealt uh, right at the most fundamental level, and structural modeling and all that comes after that. If you have a loose soil at a certain location, the design of foundations will become critical, and that will become your primary concern even prior to performing the actual structural analysis at member level. So, for example, if you have a gravity load design building, a building which is not seismically detailed, seismic actions are not considered, or if considered, they were not properly implemented, seismic detailing is not performed. In case of horizontal forces or horizontal ground shaking, it will behave in a brittle manner and it will not uh, exhibit, you can say, a significant level of ductility. So its base shear versus lateral drift behavior will look like this. This curve I will use again and again to explain different concepts of seismic analysis. This curve is actually the curve between the applied horizontal forces. In fact, the sum of those forces will be base shear, so I directly use base shear on y-axis. So this is a, you can say, sum of all forces, all lateral forces at each level. For example, if there are several forces, you just sum them, you get the same base shear. Sum of all lateral forces and the resulting delta value or roof drift or roof displacement. If you divide that roof displacement with height of the building, you get roof drift. A properly designed or seismic resistant building will exhibit a different behavior. Not only it will yield at a very high lateral force, it will also show a ductile behavior. So high lateral strength plus ductile failure, low lateral strength plus brittle failure. Now the point is, after understanding all of this, now the point is that if you want to model a seismic resistant building or a building in which all the seismic detailing is done, the design is performed already, and now you want to make a nonlinear computer model for that, you should be able to simulate all of the inelastic behavior which are expected due to applied loading in that building. So actually you have to simulate all of the ductile behaviors, because the building have actually detailed such a way that it can have ductile failure. So all of those ductile behavior or inelastic phenomena should be simulated explicitly in a nonlinear computer model, and therefore you have to actually carry out nonlinear analysis for such kind of a building, because this building is expected to have certain level of yielding or certain ductility, exhibit certain ductility compared to a gravity load design building. So in next session, I think I will actually start the basic approaches of nonlinear modeling, and there I will go into more detail. So if you want to construct the structural model of seismic resistant building, I mean this kind of a building which is expected to exhibit this behavior, then you have to introduce special elements in that model in order to account for different inelastic features or different inelastic effects. So these are certain additional elements in your frame which are expected to account different inelastic phenomena. For example, flexural yielding. For example, uh, shear behavior. For example.